here, Alan. So first of all, let me start by just explaining what the conference is about. This is the 4th annual Creativity and Culture Conference. And in previous years, we've been talking about creativity in terms of its definition, in terms of what creativity means to business people, as opposed to artists, as opposed to academics. So maybe it's a good idea for me to begin by asking you, I know that you work in management, so as a consultant, as in your work with managers, in what way is creativity important for you?
Well, one of the first areas that's important is actually connecting with them in the first place and creating, let's say, social media in a way that makes a connection with them and addresses their issues. So there's a purpose behind it. It's not just creativity for the sake of it. It's to make a connection with them, and probably sometimes on an emotional level. It doesn't work for everybody, and it's a long-term investment, if you like, most of the time.
And I suppose we can look at creativity from all kinds of aspects. There's the biological, the physical presence of ourselves in a space, and then there's the emotional presence, and there's the intellectual presence. So for managers, when we're talking about creativity for managers, there is, like, when a manager is actually present, they make a difference compared with, like, during COVID, for example, people haven't been able to be physically present, but they make their presence felt in other ways, even though they're not physically present. In what way do you think the COVID pandemic has forced us to be present in ways that are not possible physically?
Interesting question. I think one of the things that's come out of it is that there's been a great deal more online work, like as we're doing right now, virtual work, and it's caused. I think one of the interesting things is it's caused management to reevaluate their offering to their customers, and there's sort of a challenge really in terms of remaining connected with their people, and I sometimes wonder whether they're actually more connected when they're having to work online than they are when they're able to go and hide in offices, dare I say. But the most important aspect of it for me is the fact that change is being forced upon management by the pandemic. There are terrible consequences for things like the arts, for example, like the theatre and entertainment field and hospitality, because people can't actually get close to each other. So it's incumbent on management to initiate and draw upon the the imagination and creativity of their people. It's an opportunity to ask questions like, so how could we connect with our customers, clients, service users under these circumstances and maintain the business? And there are businesses that have actually grown during the pandemic because they've adapted to the changing situations really, really fast. So I think that there's the connection with the people in the teams, and there is the connection with with the marketplace, with the customers, which I think is something that's much undervalued. There's too much focus on shareholder value and not enough on customer value. And this is very much focused people on it should be focusing managers on how can we offer value to our customers in the circumstances that our customers find themselves in. So.
And it's interesting you talk about the fact that now that we're having to communicate with each other in a virtual stage,
sure,
perhaps we're more connected because we're able to see each other face to face, whereas in a meeting with hundreds of people, a management meeting can sometimes, there can be a couple of hundred members of staff at that meeting. We don't have that intimate face-to-face connection with the person addressing us. So in a way, the virtual environment has brought us closer than the physical
Yeah.
environment.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's much more immediate. Yes. And I think there's, and the other aspect is that one of the things that's popular in the Japanese way of working, in the Toyota way of working, and lean, is go and see. And how often does management stay locked in its offices or the executive board level floor in the office block without going right down to go and see what's actually happening? Now they can be face to face with people in the organisation, in their teams, and perhaps hopefully they're taking in new information, new insights from that opportunity.
So the new way of working, like relying more on the virtual space, has brought into doubt the importance of our physical presence in the workplace, hasn't it? You know, like, do we really need to be physically present? For example, in my work, I could, if I wanted to, go and meet some of my students in their workplaces, which can be at the cost of several hours of traveling time. And
Sure.
now I don't need to do that because my physical presence isn't actually essential. I can be just as present online, save myself the few hours of traveling. So,
Sure.
so the question is, like, our physical presence as opposed to our virtual presence. You know, do we really need to be physically present? Do we need to travel abroad to France for a meeting in person, whereas we could just as easily Skype in or Zoom in, or, you know, use social media for or a virtual conference room to save on the travel costs and leave a carbon footprint?
I remember perhaps a couple of months ago, on a virtual networking meeting of a local network here in Worcestershire, an accountant, and let's call him an accountant, manager of an accountancy and financial services business, was saying how now, and this was during a Zoom meeting, networking meeting, he was saying how he used to spend 3 hours going to London for a 3-hour meeting and 3 hours coming back from a 3-hour meeting. And now he can have the meeting and do other things in his day. So you're absolutely right. Yes, and more immediate. But I think the physical presence and physically meeting people occasionally is powerful, because with the best will in the world, the virtual world does filter out the human connection to some extent. I think we have to be aware of that.
Right. But very often when we're traveling to all these distant places, we're not connecting with those who are local to us. You know, we're spending so much of our time traveling to.
Yes, there's an opportunity been created to spend more time with more people. Yes, absolutely right.
Yeah, more people who are local to us. So the pandemic has created an emergence of new ways of working and new ways of managing, hasn't it?
Yes, I think so. And certainly it should be causing management to review what it's doing, rather than hoping that when we got over this, we can go back to business as usual. Well, I think here's the news. It's not going to be like that in future. Too much business has already moved. Even yesterday, there was I was on a networking meeting from under the auspices of the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Chamber of Commerce, and there was a business there who provided training, and they specifically previously actually their USP was, we will come and train on your site for you, and and now they can't do that, and they've invented now evolved into created a live classroom environment. They're projecting from a live classroom environment to, and change their offerings. So it is possible, and even for people who've got their whole business focused on face-to-face contact, they were able to reimagine themselves.
Yeah, that's a powerful word, reimagining ourselves, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I think.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, reimagining is like, it's just so powerful, because so much of creativity begins with that starting point, is that imagination and reimagination.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's you could, it's difficult to sometimes I have a mind that a visual mind that keeps flitting from image to image. So in some respects, I find it easier to do that sort of thing. However, I think any opportunity that changes the environment. There was a quote which I've just forgotten about. Oh, it was Einstein. That's right. About, everything outside of us is our environment. Is the environment that we experience. That's not verbatim, but so if you think that something outside us, outside of us in our environment changes, then doesn't that have an effect on us? Shouldn't we be recognizing it's had an effect, and not just trying to withdraw, but actually embracing the fact that, oh, the environment's changed. So what does that mean? What can we do with that? Where can that take us? But we haven't got where we are today, even with this virtual environment that we're talking on now, without people seizing new opportunities, no matter how I don't know how wonderful or how traumatic that experience has been. What do we learn? And then that's one of the things that comes from my business name for me, of key business improvement. Learning is the key. And if you're not continually saying, okay, reevaluate, reimagine, and what did we learn from this situation? How can it move us forward?
Yeah, and that's where that feedback loop between presence, emergence, and impact comes in, because as you say, it's always it needs to be a process of learning and adaptation, because we'll find that businesses who don't respond to the external environment, they don't survive. They haven't learned.
Even in the hospitality industry, you see on the television that some early in the pandemic and early in the lockdown, some pubs and cafes were turning over to delivering meals. They went into that format very early on, whereas other ones have been staggering around ever since. And what does it mean for a pub, for example, where they only previously have provided drinks? Then that's a real wake-up call. It's no use saying, it's just sitting there and saying, oh well, we'll wait until it comes back, because you won't have a business if it goes on for much longer. So
responding to the emergent situation around us.
Exactly, the emergent situation. Yeah, you have to. That's one of the things that I find. There's a sort of paradox within planning, I find, for management, is you've got, and I was listening to I was listening to somebody yesterday who was advocating a very strong focus on goals and deadlines, and you've got to make it. Yes, however, when a pandemic comes along, you really got to, or even something less serious, a change in your environment, then you really have to take that into account. And it's no use having hard and fast goals. If this isn't going to work, we got to change things.
Yeah, sometimes those goals become inappropriate goals if we're not taking the context into consideration. And this leads me, you talk about planning, and some businesses rely very heavily on scenario planning, and then they will have like the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and numerous scenarios in between. And scenario planning is a little bit like, well, when we're coaching, we think about those what if or act as if behaviors. Like we imagine that we're working towards a future that we are creating, we're imagining, and that future may need to be reimagined many times. In your work as a consultant, how creative do you think that the scenario planning activities can be in order to create the futures that the businesses want to create for themselves?
Scenario planning can and should be very imaginative, but I what's really worrying is that people, managements just don't do scenario planning. They're very keen on to be cruel. There is a tendency in some to do a lot of planning for next year, the goals and the targets, and they'll have to come up with the annual plan, and then that's filed with due ceremony until they can start the next planning cycle, which is the extreme of. But as I can't remember the name of the author, but I remember reading one of the classic books on scenario planning, and it's such a, there's so much needs to go into it. It's very difficult for an SME, for example, to spend time doing whole scenario planning, but you do have to think about what if, at least what if, occasionally, and it is hard. It is hard for organisations, but it does come down to, as Carol Dweck has done in her work, the difference between fixed and growth mindset. It's a real challenge for folk with fixed mindsets to actually countenance the fact that things have to change. Which perhaps that's one of the big issues. Have you got a senior management in an organisation, or the owners of the business, that actually have a growth mindset and learning outlook on life that takes into account all these changes in the environment?
Well, this is where we have to differentiate between one person and a group of people. You know, in most organizations, it would not be one person doing the scenario planning. It would need to be a group of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
To avoid those what you're alluding to now, that if one person has a very fixed mindset, then the scenario planning that they will do will be very limited, and it needs a team of people to be working on scenario planning to avoid that limitation. And also the visions, you know, like very often an organization will have a vision which doesn't change to adapt to the context, to the newer context. So they might have created a vision 10 years previously and no one has really brought it to life, as it were. It's just a vision that's gathering dust. So, but those are the creative aspects of a business. It's the vision and the scenarios and all the creativity that keeps it afresh, right?
Yes, I think so, because there was an organisation that I was in and still know of, where they had a 5-year plan. And this is the 5-year plan, and we'll work our way through the 5-year plan until we get to the end, and then we'll have the next 5-year plan. For me, if you used the word emergent earlier, and surely these plans should be emergent, because there's a whole systemic environment that they're in, with interactions and interrelationships all over the place. You can have a general goal, a general direction, which a vision will give you a general direction. But every now and again, as Stephen Covey once said in one of his presentations, the leadership job is to go up the palm tree with all the management and teams cutting a road through the jungle, and the leadership going up the palm tree and looking around and saying, wrong jungle. It's at the end of the day, it is emergent. The whole situation is emergent. However hard that is for people and their investment in because if you put a lot of work into developing a business or developing a direction for the business, it's really hard to say, well, sorry, we've got to start again, because the pandemic's come along, and we don't know when a virus is going to be effective. It's going to be available and be effective. Often it takes 2 years for the tests on these antivirus drugs to actually be tested, and all the outcomes of that, all the ramifications. You don't know what effects they're going to have on the body, as we saw I saw on the BBC on Wednesday evening, the two von Tulican brothers, twins, and one brother got terrible side effects from the virus. He overcome the virus. He was in remission from that, but it had terrible effects on his heart rhythm. Now, you don't know that what the immunization is going to have effects is going to have on people, on their systems. So it's a tough job, but it requires open minds and not closed minds.
Yeah, and you were saying earlier on about businesses setting 5-year plans and having a direction, a clear direction, and very often that's a very linear plan, isn't it? It's a linear cause and effect, simplistic kind of plan, meeting those targets, whereas life is much more complex. And the virus has shown us just how complex life can be, and that we have to think in terms of complexity rather than simple linear cause and effect.
Yes, and we've got complexity in terms of what's happening in the environment. The fact that there's a complexity in terms of the ambience across the world is getting warmer, and then there's a side effect to that it's melting the permafrost and releasing not only CO2 but methane, which is even worse. So it's no use having a linear thought about your business or about how energy is generated, because we just can't go on working in that way, in that linear way. And grow, doing the same old. One day the whole human race, in fact, is going to be in deep trouble.
That's right. Certainly, with all this focus on productivity and increasing the GDP in unsustainable ways, that is a very linear approach, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a linear approach with this present government, in the UK government, with let's build, chopping down trees and cover. Just a minute, whoa. What effect is that going to have on the environment? uncontrolled, it may, I'm sure it's possible to have a much, because I'm an expert in process and systems as well for management, I know there's probably 50% waste in any given organization. There's 50% waste. It's hard to reduce that and keep everything in balance, but the opportunities are there, and it must be there in the planning situation as well. It doesn't mean just having some simple approach just because we want to get, as you say, we want to get GDP back on track, and the tax is up, and so we can go and spend and blah blah blah. It's much more complicated than that. That's where systems thinking comes in.
Yeah, and with being a systems thinker, you know that like a tiny change in one part of the process can have a huge impact in a totally seemingly unrelated part of the process.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and it's frustrating in a way that systems thinking isn't more widespread. It should enable people to step back, not to get confused, but to step back and just ask better questions. As simple as that. Just ask better questions of what the situation is. But it is complex, absolutely, and so you never know, do you, what's going to emerge.
Well, we can already see like all these different things emerging around us. What do you think has been the impact of the external emergent events on us as individuals? In what way do you think we will be impacted, not only as society in general, but as individuals?
Well, it will vary depending on where people are at the beginning of the experience, I think, and what support they're getting, and interaction. That one of the sort of pluses is a sort of balance of plus and minus. The situations change, which enables people to have a new view of things. But on the other hand, it's a lot of the interactions that they might have had with peers and friends and family, the casual interactions, which are so important on the psychological side, have been reduced. So some people, sadly, will be adversely affected. But there are obviously instances of people going beyond the call with food banks, for example, just to name one thing. You look at how people have rallied round food banks, and the cry went out to help food banks, and wonderful avalanche of food and other goods came into them, and we've got charity shops with saying, hold on guys, just no more just at the moment, which is great. So it swings and roundabouts. Obviously it swings around. Sadly some people won't be in a position, and it's incumbent on all of us in a position to get support, and it's incumbent on all of us when we see a situation like that not to walk by on the other side, but to offer to help.
I suppose the pandemic has highlighted this importance of relationships, hasn't it? It's exposed, the people who live on their own, and they were very reliant on physical interaction solely in their workplace. And now that they can't go to the workplace for the social aspects, they suddenly realize that they don't have strong relationships that are personal rather than professional.
Yes, and that comes back again to management. Instead of taking a limited view of their responsibilities, but realizing that they are responsible for people in their organization, and what can they do to help those people. And there is, if their outlook is limited to payback, there will be a payback for supporting their teams and their people in terms of the commitment to the organization. Well, they looked after us in the bad times, so we'll go that extra mile. It seems that, sadly, I know organizations have got a problem with lack of business and cash flow, but there seems to be too much getting rid of staff in this current situation. And what are you losing? Because all those people have some knowledge of your business. And what do you? I think that's one of the dreadful things about redundancies in organisations, that they pay people to take knowledge or how to use knowledge or apply it in their organisation. They're being paid to take that knowledge and experience away. And organisations undervalue the knowledge. I mean, I know 2 cases through my career where people, one was a small, medium-sized enterprise that I worked at, and there the apparent janitor character, if you wanted to know what was going on, or you wanted to do this, that, or the other, you used to go to him because he knew what was what. And so it's so easy for people to just say, oh well, they're just the janitor or the floor sweeper or whatever, when there could be actually part of the glue that makes the organization work.
Yeah,
so they're all human, and
that person is really networked, and it's
yes.
People undervalue the importance of networks. And so someone who is in that position in the organization where they have access to everyone, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy, it's through those networks that knowledge gets processed and synthesized and passed on.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So, Alan, final points then, just to sum up. So we're talking about the importance of presence, whether it's physical presence or virtual presence, tangible, intangible, and the emergence and the impact, and how we go forward with these feedback loops between these 3.
Yes, absolutely. I think that should be one of the big learning points from this particular event in our lives. I totally agree.
Okay. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Alan, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.